On December 3, 2024, the world watched in disbelief as South Korea, a beacon of democracy and economic prosperity, plunged into a state of martial law. President Yoon Suk-yeol, citing unsubstantiated threats of anti-state activities by the opposition Democratic Party, unleashed the military upon his own people. The declaration, the first of its kind since the tumultuous 1980s, sent shockwaves through the nation and beyond. The very foundations of South Korea's hard-won democracy seemed to crumble overnight. The declaration marked a stark departure from the nation's commitment to civil liberties and the rule of law. It was a chilling reminder of South Korea's authoritarian past, a past that many had hoped was consigned to the history books. The international community reacted with a mixture of condemnation and concern. The United States, South Korea's longtime ally, expressed deep reservations about the move, urging restraint and a swift return to democratic norms. The European Union echoed these sentiments, calling for dialogue and a de-escalation of tensions. The declaration of martial law was a turning point in South Korea's modern history. It exposed the fragility of democratic institutions and the ever-present threat of authoritarianism. The events of that day would have profound and lasting consequences for the nation's political landscape and its people. President Yoon Suk-yeol's decision to declare martial law did not occur in a vacuum. It was the culmination of months of escalating political tensions and a deepening divide between the ruling People Power Party and the opposition Democratic Party. Yoon, a former prosecutor with a reputation for being tough on crime, had campaigned on a platform of law and order. However, his critics argued that his policies were increasingly authoritarian and aimed at silencing dissent. The political climate in South Korea had become increasingly polarized in the years leading up to the declaration of martial law. The gap between the conservative right, represented by Yoon's People Power Party, and the liberal left, led by the Democratic Party, had widened considerably. Issues such as economic inequality, social welfare, and North Korea policy fueled this division, creating a climate of mistrust and animosity between the two sides. Yoon's relationship with the opposition had been particularly contentious. He accused the Democratic Party of being soft on North Korea and of undermining national security. The opposition, in turn, accused Yoon of being a threat to democracy, pointing to his attempts to control the media and his crackdown on dissent. The political atmosphere in South Korea had become a tinderbox, ripe for a spark to ignite a major conflagration. Yoon's declaration of martial law provided that spark, plunging the nation into a crisis that would test its democratic foundations to their core. In the immediate aftermath of the martial law declaration, the machinery of military control swung into action with chilling efficiency. Soldiers fanned out across major cities, taking up positions at key government buildings, media outlets, and transportation hubs. The National Assembly, the very symbol of South Korea's democracy, was cordoned off, with lawmakers barred from entering. It was a brazen assault on the legislature and a stark symbol of the military's grip on power. One of the first casualties of the crackdown was freedom of the press. Media outlets were placed under strict censorship, with journalists prohibited from reporting on anything that could be construed as critical of the government or the military. Social media platforms were also heavily monitored, with any posts deemed subversive quickly removed. The regime moved swiftly to control the narrative, attempting to quell dissent and project an image of stability and control. The impact on ordinary citizens was immediate and deeply unsettling. A palpable sense of fear and uncertainty gripped the nation as the military presence became impossible to ignore. Freedoms that South Koreans had long taken for granted, such as the right to assemble and protest peacefully, were suspended indefinitely. The specter of authoritarianism, once a distant memory, had returned to haunt the streets of South Korea. Despite the swift and brutal crackdown, the South Korean people refused to be silenced. Protests erupted across the country, with citizens from all walks of life bravely taking to the streets to denounce the martial law declaration and demand a return to democracy. From university students to office workers, from artists to retirees, a diverse cross-section of society united in their opposition to the military's power grab. The international community added its voice to the chorus of condemnation. Governments, human rights organizations, and world leaders denounced the martial law declaration, urging President Yoon to reverse course and engage in dialogue with the opposition. The United States, while careful not to jeopardize its alliance with South Korea, expressed deep concern over the situation, calling for a swift return to democratic order. The outpouring of opposition, both domestic and international, put immense pressure on the Yoon administration. The images of peaceful protesters met with brute force, broadcast around the world, painted a damning picture of a regime turning its back on its people and its democratic principles. The message was clear. The world was watching, and the world stood with the people of South Korea. Section 5. The Price of Power, Yoon's Impeachment, and the Collapse of his Presidency. The groundswell of opposition to President Yoon Suk-yeol's declaration of martial law proved to be his undoing. The very institutions he had sought to subvert turned against him, holding him accountable for his actions. In a stunning turn of events, the National Assembly, once again able to convene after the brief period of military control, voted overwhelmingly to impeach Yoon on charges of violating the Constitution and abusing his power. The impeachment sent shockwaves through South Korea. It was a stark reminder that even the highest office in the land was not above the law, and that the South Korean people, through their elected representatives, had the power to hold their leaders accountable. The Constitutional Court, in a unanimous decision, upheld the impeachment, formally removing Yoon from office. Yoon's presidency, once full of promise for his supporters, lay in ruins, a cautionary tale of the perils of unchecked ambition and the fragility of democratic norms. His fall from grace was as swift as it was dramatic, a stark reminder that power, when wielded without restraint or respect for the rule of law, is a dangerous and fleeting thing. Section 6. Picking up the pieces, the interim government and the road to recovery. In the wake of President Yoon Suk-yeol's impeachment, South Korea faced the daunting task of restoring trust in its democracy and healing the deep divisions that had been exposed and exacerbated during the tumultuous period of martial law. An interim government headed by Prime Minister Kim Buk-yeom took the helm, tasked with steering the nation towards stability and reconciliation. The interim government faced a multitude of challenges. The first order of business was to ensure a smooth transition of power and to reassure a shaken nation that the rule of law would be upheld. The military, which had played such a controversial role in recent events, was ordered back to its barracks, and civilian control over all aspects of government was swiftly reasserted. One of the most pressing issues facing the interim government was the need to address the grievances that had fueled the political crisis in the first place. The deep-seated economic anxieties, the sense of social alienation, and the lack of faith in political institutions, these were issues that could no longer be ignored. Section 7. Scars of division, lingering distrust, and the struggle for unity. Despite the interim government's efforts to restore normalcy and promote healing, the scars of South Korea's brush with authoritarianism ran deep. The brief but traumatic period of martial law left an indelible mark on the national psyche, fueling a climate of mistrust and suspicion that proved difficult to dissipate. The political landscape remained deeply polarized, with the wounds of the impeachment battle still raw. The Democratic Party, while triumphant in its efforts to remove President Yoon, faced accusations of exploiting the crisis for political gain. The People Power Party, reeling from the downfall of its leader, grappled with internal divisions and struggled to regain the trust of the electorate. Civil society, too, bore the brunt of the crisis. The crackdown on dissent during the martial law period had a chilling effect on free speech and assembly. While these freedoms were ostensibly restored with the return to civilian rule, a sense of caution lingered, a reluctance to speak out too boldly for fear of reprisal. Section 8. The stakes have never been higher, South Korea on the eve of a pivotal election. As South Korea prepared for a snap presidential election, the weight of the recent past hung heavy over the nation. The upcoming election, scheduled for June 2, 2025, was more than just a contest for political power. It was a referendum on the future of South Korean democracy itself. The Democratic Party, riding a wave of public sympathy and outrage over the martial law declaration, enjoyed a significant lead in the polls. Lee Jae-myung, the party's nominee, campaigned on a platform of strengthening democratic institutions, promoting social justice, and healing the divides that had plagued the nation. The People Power Party, seeking to rebuild after the tumultuous Yoon presidency, faced an uphill battle. The party's candidate, Hong Joon-pyo, a veteran politician known for his conservative views, sought to distance himself from the excesses of the previous administration, promising a more moderate and inclusive approach. The outcome of the election would have far-reaching consequences for South Korea. It would determine whether the nation would emerge from the shadows of martial law stronger and more united, or whether it would succumb to the forces of division and distrust that threatened to tear it apart. Section 9. Looking ahead. Challenges and opportunities for a nation at a crossroads. As South Korea stood poised on the brink of a new era, it faced a future fraught with both challenges and opportunities. The shadow of the martial law declaration loomed large, a stark reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the ever-present threat of authoritarianism. Yet, amidst the uncertainty, there was also a glimmer of hope, a sense that the nation had been through a crucible from which it could emerge stronger and more resilient. The task ahead was formidable, rebuilding trust in government, healing the deep divisions within society and safeguarding democratic norms. These were challenges that would require sustained effort and a shared commitment to national unity. The wounds inflicted by the martial law period ran deep, and the process of healing would be long and arduous. Yet, there were also reasons for optimism. The South Korean people, in their resilience and determination to defend their hard-won freedoms, had demonstrated the enduring power of democracy. The events of the past year had served as a wake-up call, a stark reminder of the preciousness of liberty and the importance of eternal vigilance in its defense.